Hello, everyone. It's great for you to join us today. This morning, we've got an interview with Christy Lowe, who's a member of our church here at Seaford Baptist Church and also a doctor, an A&E doctor. So we're just going to ask her a few questions today, see how she's been getting on and see what's been happening in her workplace. Hi, Christy. Thanks for joining us today.
Good morning.
So I thought I'd start off with asking you a kind of practical question. How are things at work at the moment, kind of right now during this pandemic?
So for those of you that don't know me, so I work in an emergency department or two emergency departments in Kent. And certainly for this part of the pandemic or this stage of the pandemic, Kent and East Kent in particular were right at the forefront of this sort of last little wave. So from just before Christmas, since just before Christmas, we've been really busy. So lots and lots of patients coming in, lots of very sick patients coming in. So work has been fairly pressured. So coming into our emergency department, as well as having the new patients coming in on a minute by minute, hourly basis. I was obviously then managing the patients who we still have in our department. And some of the pressures, as well as new patients coming in all the time, is that there often are not sufficient numbers of beds coming up in a timely fashion for us to move patients out of our department onto a medical ward, for example. So at times our department has been fuller than we would like it to be, and that obviously has stresses in itself. That said, over the last 6 weeks or so, certainly the first 4 or 5 weeks have been really busy, but over the last week or so, the numbers of patients coming into our department, as well as the number of patients, sick patients in our hospital, in hospital beds, has started to decrease, and that is a positive. Because obviously not as many people are needing to come into our hospital, and that has provided some much needed relief, a bit of a break from some of those pressures. We're obviously still seeing a lot of sick people, but not at the same volumes that we were sort of 6 or 7 weeks ago, which has been good.
Okay, so it's obviously, I guess we're thinking a result of the lockdown and vaccines being given. That's a positive.
Yeah, so I think what we're seeing at the moment is a result of the lockdown. So the overall numbers of patients in the community, and particularly in the Kent community, most people in Kent probably had COVID. Most people who were going to get it probably had it, unfortunately, a month or two ago. So lots of patients, lots of individuals there have had it already. But I think the lockdown has obviously had a massive impact and positive effect in terms of reducing the numbers coming in, and hopefully that will be sustained, you're right, as the vaccines come through and more people are vaccinated.
Okay. So over the past year, almost, during lockdown, we hear stories, the NHS and the things doctors have had to do and the decisions they've had to make, and I think none of us would have wanted to have been in that position, and could really feel for lots of the doctors and medical health staff that have had to make hard decisions. I mean, how have you found that? There must have been, over the past year, some hard decisions to make, and how's that been for you?
Yeah, okay. So challenging questions, Alex, thank you. So you're right. I think there have been lots of difficult decisions to make, certainly right at the beginning, even decisions about how we were going to run our department, how we were going to staff our department, where different patients would go in our department, what we would or wouldn't be able to offer in our department. So some of those things that we've had to pass on to other areas. So for example, all our children now we don't see in the emergency department, they go straight up to be seen by the paediatricians. Similar, our minor injuries are managed in an entirely different area of our department. So we've given over our department now for managing essentially sick adult patients. But in terms of difficult decisions about who gets, how you treat patients, who gets to be admitted into hospital, who gets to go to intensive care, they are difficult decisions to make. But I think certainly within the trust and the department that I work in, we're very well supported and very well backed up by the science that has been available. And obviously that has evolved over the year. But the science that is available for what is in a patient's best interests and what treatments are or aren't likely to be effective. But we also have good communication both within our department but also with our ITU colleagues. And if we say this patient doesn't quite fit your criteria for needing admission yet, but we're really worried about them, please come and see them face to face. They are then able to do that. So I think some of the pressures and some of those difficult decisions haven't been so bad haven't been so hard because it's been a shared decision making amongst us, either as A&E consultants or by us along with either respiratory consultants or intensive care consultants. So that has helped, I think, having shared decision making between us. But you're right, there are difficult decisions, and I think sometimes when you've made those decisions, it's about thinking, is that the right decision? And most of the time it is the right decision, and then feeling confident that and comfortable with having provided the best available care that you've been able to provide for somebody. And even if that is deciding that they're for end of life care, then making sure that that's communicated well with patient where appropriate and their relatives, and then supporting them as best as possible through that next phase.
Mm. And yeah, so I know it was maybe a hard question, but also I think it's, so most people I think understand the pressure the NHS has been under, and really appreciate the NHS at this time and the things they've had to do. So I think it's just people hearing some of the things that you've had to do. I think it's not, I think it's very much just wanting to see it from a point of view of knowing that no one would want to be in that position, and also to really appreciate and say thank you to you and the NHS and the doctors and all healthcare staff that have had to, do things that they probably didn't expect to, or, we didn't expect to find ourselves in this position, a year or 18 months ago. So, and so I suppose thinking about the question you've just asked and, the situation that we're in at the moment, have you found God has helped you at this time?
So I think there's probably 3 different areas that I feel that God has helped me. So first, I think, is from a personal protection point of view. So, do we call it PPE? So God's PPE. So I'm very fortunate. I haven't had coronavirus, I say, to my knowledge. So I feel very fortunate not to have had that, despite the exposure that I have had on a daily basis at work. I'm also fully vaccinated. I managed to get my second vaccine after 3 weeks before the government changed the rules to extend it to 3 months. So I feel very fortunate about that. But I think also personal protection in terms of having a supportive work team around me. So I feel very protected and very blessed to be working in the department in the area that I'm working in at the moment. I think the second area in terms of how God's helped me, surrounding me by a supportive and a wonderfully distracting family, so that when I'm not at work, having that distraction of homeschool or help with piano practice or mum, what are we going to eat for dinner, has been wonderful to have something else to think about, something else to focus on, something else that's more important than the coronavirus pandemic, that's something else to use my mind and allay my anxieties and fears, because I'm concentrating on something else. So I feel very fortunate to be living with other people and to be surrounded by them. And I think probably the third way in terms of how has God helped me, or rather I have been helped by being able to focus and always remember that God is in control. And there is a fantastic Hillsong, and I'm not going to be able to remember it now, but there's a fantastic Hillsong song that I first heard back at the end of last year, beginning of last year, probably January or February last year, that talks about not worrying, because God is in control. So whatever comes your way, whatever you're faced with, God is in control. And I have found that really helpful to continue to remind myself and reflect upon, particularly at different phases when, you know, something changes and all over again we're having to change how we manage patients, or how we protect ourselves at work, or which areas of our department we can or can't see different sorts of patients in. So there's a lot of uncertainty on a sort of a weekly basis at work, but always coming back to the, you know, God is in control. He knows what's going on. He is working for our best interests, in our best interests, for the best outcome. We, you know, won't necessarily be seeing it directly at this time, but, you know, in the months and years ahead, we'll be able to look back on this time and see where God was working and how he was working. So God has helped me in that sense.
Yeah, brilliant. So just before we finish, I thought it would be useful, maybe useful for some of the people watching, if they could have some, what things could we be praying for at the moment for, you know, doctors, people in your position, and, you know, maybe the NHS in general, kind of some good points and things you think would be helpful to pray for at the moment.
Yeah, so I think probably the main one is some respite. So pretty much everybody within the NHS currently is pretty exhausted. So it's encouraging that the numbers are currently coming down at the moment, and provided that continues, then that coming down of numbers will help to allow people to be a little less busy and stressed at work. Yes, we are entitled and allowed still to take annual leave, but lots of staff feel uncomfortable about doing that because they know that they will be increasing the workload of their other colleagues who are still at work. So some respite or a bit of a break, I think, would be a key thing, because this is going to be carrying on for the months ahead, in one way or another. I don't want to say years, but probably months and years ahead in one way or another. So I think a little bit of time out, a little bit of reduced pressure, I think would be really helpful. And I think as well, probably a plan, you know, a plan or some certainty or some hope in what's going to happen over the year ahead. And some of that is pretty straightforward, because obviously the vaccine coming online is fantastic and wonderful news for us in the UK. And that will change the picture and the pattern of our COVID over the year ahead. But also some of that uncertainty about not knowing what's happening next is very much government-led. So I think probably some peace about people being comfortable and at ease with what is or isn't going to happen over the year ahead. So feeling less anxious and having a bit of a break, I think probably two things for people to be prayed for.
Cool. Okay, that sounds really good. Maybe just as we finish what you're saying there, I think I put this verse up the other day on somewhere, and it, just as you're saying, it's something that came to me. It's a famous verse, everyone will know it. Jeremiah 29:11. You were talking about plans and also having some rest, and it says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." I guess that's it, you know, although we don't always feel like we've got a plan, and maybe we haven't got a plan, God's got a plan, and it is to prosper us and to give us hope and a future. So, and that's the thing to always remember, there is hope, isn't there? For maybe for those watching that sometimes might feel that, especially at the moment, there isn't, but there is hope, and God has got a plan for us. Well, thank you, Christy. Thanks for joining us today, and also thank you for all the work you do. I know, as you said, there's a team behind you, like in all hospitals, a great team, but thank you for what you're doing, and also taking God into those situations as well. And yeah, we really appreciate you. So thanks for talking to us today.
Very welcome. Thank you very much.